Welcome to the Heartbreak Chronicles, where every story is a raw reflection of life. Hit that subscribe button to stay tuned, give us a like to show your support, and share this episode with your friends. Don't forget to leave a comment and let us know what you think. Now, let's dive into today's story. My name is Jack Thompson. My friends call me JT. I'm a little-known producer in the music industry and have been in the business for over 20 years. My wife, Ellen, is a brilliant attorney who works at one of the largest law firms in New York. We have two children, 23-year-old daughter Sarah and 20-year-old son Kevin. In the eyes of outsiders, we are a happy family. Until that night, I thought I had the most perfect life in the world. It was a normal Friday night, and I had just finished playing a music festival. I stood backstage, looking at the cheering crowd, and felt a great sense of satisfaction. Just then, I noticed a few familiar faces in the audience, Ellen's coworkers. I frowned. Shouldn't Ellen be in Chicago on business? Why was her coworker on the festival circuit in New York? Stranger still, I don't see Ellen. An uneasy feeling began to spread through me. I tried to convince myself that it was just a coincidence, that maybe Ellen had changed her schedule. But that lingering doubt was like a seed that took root in my mind. After the show, I called Ellen. She picked up the phone with a hint of exhaustion in her voice. "Hi, honey, how was the show?" I hesitated, then asked, "Not bad. How are you doing in Chicago?" "Well, that went well," she answered quickly. "We just got out of a long meeting, and I was just about to take a break." I felt my heart sink. Ellen is lying. Her coworkers were in New York, and she claimed to be in Chicago. I held back my shock and anger and ended the call as if nothing had happened. After hanging up the phone, I sat in my hotel room and felt like the whole world was spinning. We've been married for 25 years, and there's never been any doubt. Ellen has been the perfect wife and mom, and we've always had a great relationship. But now, it all seems to be a well-woven lie. I need to know the truth, but I couldn't question Ellen directly, and if my suspicions were wrong, it would only hurt our feelings. I need help. I need advice from someone I can trust. I thought of my good friend Steve. Steve's a detective, and he's experienced in dealing with difficult situations like this. I called him and briefly explained the situation. Steve listened and was silent for a moment, then said, "JT, I understand how you're feeling right now, but don't jump to conclusions without hard evidence. I know a great private detective named Frank Jones. If you really want to get to the bottom of this, he's the best choice." I gratefully accepted Steve's advice. The next morning, I contacted Frank. Frank is a middle-aged man in his late 50s and looks very smart and capable. After listening to my account, he said gravely, "Mr. Thompson, based on your description, this does warrant an investigation. I must warn you, however, that the results of the survey may not be pleasant for you. Are you sure you want to do this?" I took a deep breath and nodded firmly. I need to know the truth, no matter how it turns out. Frank starts working on Ellen's whereabouts. He'd arranged for Ellen to be followed in New York and was also looking into her work schedule and travel records. I felt like I was living in a dream while I waited for the results of Frank's investigation. I tried to stay normal, work as usual, spend time with Ellen and the kids as usual. But every time I see Ellen's smiling face and hear her gentle words, an agony wells up in my heart. I don't know if the woman I've loved for 25 years is who I thought she was. Finally, on a Friday afternoon, Frank called me and said he had made some preliminary discoveries. We arranged to meet at a cafe. Frank handed me a folder of photographs and documents. "Mr. Thompson," he said, "according to our investigation, your wife did travel frequently with several of her colleagues. But they have a strange pattern of behavior. They usually book neighboring hotel rooms and often visit each other late at night. I looked through the photos and saw Ellen and her coworkers in the hotel lobby, restaurant, and other places. While the photos themselves were nothing special, the thought that Ellen had been lying to me about her whereabouts gave me a pang. Is there more?" I asked with difficulty. Frank nodded. "It has come to our attention that your wife and one of her male coworkers, Henry Williams, seem to be particularly close. They often dine out alone, and sometimes even enter each other's rooms in the middle of the night." I felt like my heart was going to stop. Ellen and Henry? I know Henry. He's an old colleague of Ellen's. We've also been to a couple company parties together. I felt a wave of nausea at the thought that Ellen might be having an illicit relationship with him. Mr. Thompson, Frank's voice pulled me back to reality. I know this information may be disturbing to you, but remember, these are just preliminary findings. We will need to conduct a more in-depth investigation to determine the specifics. I nodded woodenly, feeling like my whole world was falling apart. What am I going to do about Ellen? What am I going to do with my kids? More importantly, what am I going to do with 25 years of a marriage that may no longer exist? As I walked out of the cafe, I decided to continue this investigation. I need to know the truth, no matter how brutal it is. I need to know if my life is really just a well-woven lie. Back home, watching Ellen prepare dinner in the kitchen and the kids watching TV in the living room. This seemingly cozy family scene now feels so strange to me. I held back the pain I felt inside and acted as if nothing had happened. But I knew that from this day on, nothing would be the same. My life, my marriage, my family was under a cloud. And I, for one, will have to face this harsh truth alone. The results of Frank's investigation pierced my peaceful life like a sword. But I know that this is just the beginning. I need more evidence. I need to be completely sure of what Ellen is really doing. I asked Frank to continue his investigation, paying special attention to Ellen's travels in New York. In the meantime, I decided to take some action myself. After all, no one knows Ellen better than I do, and maybe I can pick up on some details that Frank might have missed. During Ellen's next business trip, I began my own undercover investigation. I searched our bedroom carefully, going through Ellen's closet, dresser, and desk. I didn't know what I was looking for, maybe a hidden love letter, or a hotel room card, anything to confirm my suspicions. However, after hours of searching, I found nothing. Ellen doesn't seem to have left any suspicious marks. This left me with both disappointment and a glimmer of hope. Maybe my suspicions are wrong? Maybe it was all just a terrible misunderstanding? But deep down I knew it wasn't that simple. Ellen is a smart woman, and if she's really hiding something, she'll be very careful. I sat on the edge of my bed, feeling more alone and confused than ever. I picked up my cell phone and dialed Frank's number. "Frank, we need more evidence," I said. "I didn't find anything at the house." Frank was silent for a moment, then said, "Mr. Thompson, there are some more radical steps we can take, but I must warn you that there may be some legal gray areas involved." I took a deep breath. "Tell me your plan." Frank explained that we can install some hidden cameras and recording devices in our homes. In the meantime, he suggested that on Ellen's next business trip, we could try to intercept her luggage and see if we could find some clues. I realized that these practices are morally and legally controversial, but the thought that Ellen might have betrayed me and our family made me feel like I had no choice. Okay, I finally agreed. Let's do it. Over the next few days, I helped Frank's team install surveillance equipment in the house. I felt a pang of pain with each camera I installed. This is my home, the home Ellen and I built together. Now it's become a place of doubt and betrayal. A week later, Ellen is traveling again. This time it was to Boston for a 3-day legal seminar. On the way to take her to the airport, I tried to act as if nothing had happened. "Take care on the road, honey," I said as I kissed her goodbye at the airport. "I'll miss you." Ellen smiled and said, "I'm going to miss you too. Don't forget to take care of the kids." I felt a pang of bitterness as I watched her disappear through the security checkpoint. This woman I loved so much is now a stranger. As planned, Frank's men intercept Ellen's luggage at the airport. They quickly checked the contents of the bags, took pictures, and then returned the bags to the conveyor belt before Ellen realized it. Later that night, Frank sent me the results of the test. There was nothing particularly suspicious in Ellen's luggage, just some ordinary clothing and work papers. However, Frank notices that Ellen has brought much more lingerie than usual and some sexy pajamas. "It doesn't mean anything," Frank said over the phone, "but it does seem a little counterintuitive. Usually people don't bring so many of these clothes to business meetings." I felt my stomach lurch. Why does Ellen need so much lingerie and sexy pajamas? Could she really be with someone else? I don't dare to keep thinking about it. The next 2 days felt like I was living a nightmare. I worked as usual and took care of the kids, but my mind was completely off of those things. I kept checking the cameras that Frank had installed in the house, hoping to find something and afraid of actually finding something. On the third night, Ellen returned. She looked tired but pleasant and gave me a warm hug and kiss. "How was the seminar?" I asked, forcing myself to be calm. "It was great," Ellen said with a smile. "I learned a lot of new things. By the way, I brought you a little present." She pulled a beautiful tie clip out of her bag, my favorite style. I felt a stab of pain as I looked into her expectant eyes. This woman, is she my beloved wife? Or is she an adept liar in disguise? That night, while Ellen was in the shower, I secretly checked her cell phone. But she seems to have been careful not to leave any suspicious texts or calls. Just when I was ready to give up, I noticed an email from Henry in her inbox. The content of the email seemed pretty generic, just discussing some work stuff. But the last sentence caught my attention. "I've made arrangements for this special meeting next Thursday. Looking forward to spending quality time with you." My heart is racing. A special meeting? Is this some kind of code? Are Ellen and Henry really plotting something? I hastily snapped a picture of the contents of the email and then put my phone back where it belonged. When Ellen came out of the bathroom, I pretended to be watching TV. "Are you okay, honey?" Ellen asked with concern. "You seem a little distracted." I forced a smile. "It's fine. I'm probably just a little tired." Ellen kissed me tenderly, "Then get some early rest." "Good night, honey." I tossed and turned as I watched her lay beside me sleeping peacefully. I know that I am standing at an important crossroads. Continuing to investigate, I could have discovered a terrible truth that would have completely destroyed my family and my life. But if I stopped there, I would never be able to get rid of my inner doubts and uneasiness. Early the next morning, I called Frank. "Frank," I said, determination in my voice, "we need to know exactly what Ellen is going to do next Thursday. Whatever it takes, we're going to get to the bottom of this." The Thursday that Ellen traveled came sooner than I expected. I watched Ellen leave the house that morning with conflicting emotions. On the one hand, I desperately wanted to know the truth. On the other, I was afraid to face the facts that could destroy my life. Frank and his team have been in place for a long time. They'll follow Ellen's movements throughout, documenting every detail. Instead, I stayed home and kept abreast of the situation through the information Frank was sending back in real time. At 11 a.m., Frank sent the first message that Ellen had arrived at a fancy hotel. Oddly enough, the hotel was only a few blocks away from her law firm. Why does she need a meeting there? At 12 p.m., another message that Ellen had entered a hotel suite with 3 other people. That includes Henry. My heart was racing and my palms were sweating. I told myself that maybe it was just a normal work meeting. But why do it in a hotel room? Frank didn't send any new messages for the next couple hours. I was fidgety and kept checking my phone for fear of missing any updates. Finally, at 4 p.m., Frank called. "Mr. Thompson," he sounded a little hesitant. We got some pictures and video, but I must warn you that the content may make you uncomfortable. Are you sure you want to see it now?" I took a deep breath and forced myself to calm down. "Yes, Frank. Send it to me." Seconds later, I received a series of photos and videos on my cell phone. My hand trembled slightly as I clicked on the first photo. At that moment, I felt like my whole world was falling apart. On the photo, Ellen and Henry are kissing intensely. The photos and videos that followed were even more shocking. Ellen was intimate with not only Henry, but 2 other people as well. The 4 of them were in the suite engaging in behavior I can't describe in words. I sat paralyzed on the couch, feeling breathless. That's the truth. My wife, the woman I've loved for 25 years, has been betraying me. Not only that, but she was involved in this kind of group activity. I don't know how I spent the next few hours. By the time Ellen got home in the evening, I'd had most of a bottle of whiskey. "Honey, are you okay?" Ellen asked with concern, seeing how drunk I was. I looked up at her and suddenly smiled. It was a bitter, almost maddening laugh. "I'm fine, Ellen. How was your day? Did you have a good time at this special meeting?" Ellen's face instantly turned pale. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. I stood up and staggered over to her. "Don't bother explaining. I know all about it. You and Henry and the others. I know all about it." A flicker of fear, then remorse, flashed in Ellen's eyes. She started to cry, "Jack, I can explain, but I don't want to hear any more explanations." 25 years of marriage, 25 years of trust, completely collapsed in this moment. Explain what? Explain how you betrayed our marriage. Explain how you cheated on me for so many years. My voice trembled with anger. Ellen dropped to the floor and sobbed, "I'm sorry, Jack. I'm really sorry. I didn't know things would turn out this way." I felt a sudden wave of exhaustion as I watched her break down. Anger, sadness, betrayal, all the emotions were churning through me. But more than that, there was a deep disappointment and emptiness. "Ellen," I said calmly, "I want you to leave this house now. Go to a hotel for a few days. I need time to think about our future, if there is a future." Ellen cried and nodded, stumbling to her feet. She stumbled upstairs to gather some clothes and then left the house under my icy gaze. I didn't sleep a wink that night. I keep going back to our 25-year marriage and trying to figure out when it started to go wrong. We used to be so in love, so happy. Why did we become what we are now? The next morning, I called Frank. "Frank," I said, my voice hoarse, "I need you to keep investigating. I need to know how long this has been going on and who else is involved. I want to know everything." Frank was silent for a moment, then said, "Mr. Thompson, I understand how you feel right now, but are you sure you want to continue? Some truths may be more painful." I laughed bitterly. "Frank, my life has been destroyed. I need to know the whole truth, no matter how painful. Only then can I decide what to do next." Frank agreed. Over the next few weeks, he continues to delve into Ellen's relationships with her coworkers. Each new discovery was like a knife that stabbed deep into my heart. I learned that Ellen and her coworkers have had this special relationship for nearly a decade. They use business trips and meetings to carry out their clandestine activities. I, on the other hand, have been kept in the dark, believing like a fool in our happy and fulfilling marriage. But the most shocking discovery for me was yet to come. A month later, Frank came to see me with the final findings. His expression was more serious than ever. "Mr. Thompson," he said, sympathy in his voice, "we ran some DNA tests. The results show that Sarah and Kevin, they may not be your biological children. I feel like the whole world is spinning. My children, my beloved Sarah and Kevin, are not my own flesh and blood." The blow was heavier than Ellen's betrayal. Who's their real father?" I asked with difficulty. Frank handed me a report based on the DNA match. Sarah's biological father is most likely George Harris, and Kevin's biological father is Chuck Wilson. They're all Ellen's coworkers. I felt like my heart was being torn to pieces. Not only was my marriage a sham, but even my proud fatherhood was a lie. I dropped onto the couch, tears streaming down my face uncontrollably. My whole life, my whole world, completely collapsed at that moment. The truth was like a sharp knife cutting my life to pieces. My wife betrayed me. My children were not my own flesh and blood. And the family life I was so proud of turned out to be nothing more than a carefully woven lie. After the initial shock and grief, a cold anger began to spread through me. I decided to take action. As a first step, I needed to seek legal help. I picked up the phone and dialed the number of my longtime friend and attorney, Mike. "Mike," my voice was husky and firm, "I need you to recommend the best divorce attorney." There was silence on the other end of the line for a moment. "Jack, what happened?" Mike asked with concern. I briefly told him the whole story. Mike took a deep breath as he listened. "Jesus, Jack, I'm sorry this happened to you. I would contact Dave Ford immediately. He is the best divorce attorney I know. Are you okay now? Do you need me to come over and stay with you?" I shook my head, even though Mike couldn't see it. "No, Mike. I need to be alone right now. Thank you." After hanging up the phone, I sat in my study and began to think long and hard about my next move. I need to gather more evidence, not only for the divorce proceedings, but to completely expose the ugly behavior of Ellen and her coworkers. I contacted Frank again. "Frank," I said, "I need you to continue investigating Ellen and her coworkers. I want to know everything about them. Their schedule, their family situation, their finances, everything." Frank heard the determination in my voice. "Understood, Mr. Thompson. We will continue to investigate further." but I must warn you that it can cost a lot of time and money. Money is not the issue, I said coldly. I'm going to make them pay. For the next few weeks, I maintained a normal life on the surface. I continued to work, take care of Sarah and Kevin, and even had the occasional phone call with Ellen to discuss some family matters. But in the shadows, Frank's team and I have been working furiously to gather evidence. Dave Ford, the divorce attorney Mike recommended, contacted me quickly. We met and I gave him all the evidence. Mr. Thompson, Dave said seriously, based on the evidence you've provided, we have every reason to file for a fault-based divorce. Ellen's infidelity and deception gave us a big advantage. But I must ask you, are you sure you want to go down this road? It's going to be an uphill battle that could be very emotionally traumatic for you and your children. I looked Dave in the eye and said firmly, I'm sure. Ellen ruined my life, ruined my family. I'm going to make her pay. Dave nodded. Well then, let's start preparing the lawsuit papers. In the meantime, I suggest you hold off on telling Ellen about the DNA test. This could be a major trump card for us in negotiations. I agree with Dave's suggestion. Over the next few days, I started working on the divorce proceedings. Meanwhile, Frank continues to delve into the secret lives of Ellen and her coworkers. Each day, Frank brings new information. Gradually, I pieced together a complete picture of how Ellen and her coworkers had been using work trips for their clandestine activities for years. They carefully plan each special meeting and carefully cover their tracks. But Frank's investigation also led to some unexpected findings. As it turns out, most of Ellen's co-workers also have families. George Harris, Sarah's biological father, has a happy family with 2 children. Chuck Wilson, Kevin's biological father, on the other hand, just celebrated his 20th wedding anniversary. These findings gave me a wave of nausea. Not only did these people betray their spouses, they cheated on their children. I decided that I was going to make not only Ellen pay, but all the people involved in this scam get what they deserve. It was at this point that I learned that Ellen and her colleagues were planning to attend a week-long legal seminar. This workshop will be held at a luxury hotel in New York. I suddenly realized that this was the opportunity one had been waiting for. I immediately contacted Frank and Dave and began working on a detailed plan. I'm going to expose Ellen and her co-workers at the symposium in a scandal that will embarrass them in front of all their peers. Are you sure you want to do this, Jack? Asked Frank. It could have a negative impact on your career. I sneered. My life is ruined, Frank. I just want them to get a taste of what it's like to lose everything too. Dave, on the other hand, reminded me to proceed with caution. Remember, Mr. Thompson, the goal is to win the divorce proceedings. Don't do anything that might affect the outcome of the proceedings. I nodded in understanding, but deep down, I had made up my mind. I'm going to make Ellen and her ilk pay, whatever the cost. As the date of the workshop drew nearer, my plans took shape. I arranged everything, from how to infiltrate the seminar site to how to reveal the truth at the most opportune moment. I even prepared a detailed speech and evidence presentation. The night before the plan was to be implemented, I sat in my study and looked at the picture of Sarah and Kevin on my desk. Despite knowing they are not my biological children, I still love them dearly. I can't help but wonder if my impending action will hurt them. But then the anger and sense of betrayal took over again. No, I have to. Ellen and her cohorts must pay for what they have done. I close my eyes and take a deep breath. Tomorrow, everything will change. I'm going to expose this lie that has been going on for 25 years and let the truth come out. On the morning of the seminar, I arrived at the hotel early. My heart was beating fast, but my resolve was stronger than ever. Frank and his team are in place and ready to back me up. Dave, on the other hand, stood by on the other end of the phone in case any legal issues arose. I stood outside the conference room, took a deep breath, and then pushed the door open. Ellen and her co-workers were inside discussing something animatedly and froze when they saw me. "Jack," said Ellen in surprise, "what are you doing here?" I gave an icy smile. "Surprise, honey. I think it's time we had a little talk, don't you?" Then I turned to the rest of the room. "Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for interrupting your seminar, but I have something very important to announce." I walked to the center of the room and looked around. Ellen's face turned pale while Henry, George, and Chuck wore confused expressions. First, Let me introduce you to our special guest, I said, opening the side door to the conference hall. Henry, George, and Chuck's wives walked in, their faces wrought with doubt and concern. "What's going on, Jack?" asked Ellen shakily, clearly realizing that something was wrong. I ignored her and continued, "Ladies and gentlemen, we are gathered here today to expose a shocking scam that has been going on for nearly a decade." I opened the prepared slides and began to show the evidence Frank had gathered. Photos, videos, email records, one after the other, were presented to all. "These," I said, pointing to the screen, "document the special events of Ellen Thompson, Henry Williams, George Harris, and Chuck Wilson over the past decade." The room was instantly thrown into chaos. Ellen and her co-workers begin to panic and explain while their spouses go into shock and anger. I continued, "But that's not all." I turned to George and Chuck. "George, Chuck, I thought you might be particularly interested in this news." I opened another slide that showed the DNA test results. "According to this DNA test report, George, you are the biological father of my daughter Sarah. And Chuck, you're the biological father of my son Kevin." The room erupted in shock once again. George and Chuck's wives look on the verge of fainting, while Ellen slumps in her chair, tears streaming down her face. "Jack, please," Ellen cried. "Can we talk in private?" But I wasn't going to stop anymore. I continued to expose their secrets. How they used work trips to carry out these activities, how they meticulously planned each special meeting, and how they deceived their families and colleagues. When I finished, the whole room fell into dead silence. Ellen and her co-workers look like they are completely devastated, while their spouses struggle with anger and grief. I looked around at all these deceived people. I know that my behavior may cause pain to many innocent people, especially children, but in that moment, I felt a strange sense of relief. The truth is finally coming out, and the deceivers will have to face the consequences of their actions. Gentlemen, I concluded, I apologize for revealing these facts in this way, but I believe you all have a right to know the truth. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm going to see my lawyer. Ellen, you'll be receiving divorce papers soon." With that, I turned and left the conference room, leaving a mess behind. I took a deep breath as I walked out of the hotel. I know that this is just the beginning. What follows will be a tough legal and emotional battle, but at least the lies have been exposed and the truth has come out. I took out my cell phone and called Dave. "Dave, you can start the legal process." Then I sent Frank another message thanking him for his help. Finally, I hesitated, but sent Sarah and Kevin each a text. "We need to talk. When you guys are ready, feel free to give me a call. Remember, no matter what happens, I will always love you." After sending these messages, I felt a wave of exhaustion hit me. This revenge was a relief, but it also made me realize that my life will never go back to the way it was. I took a cab home and prepared to face the storm that might come next. On the way home, I thought back to the last 25 years. All those once fond memories are now overshadowed. I don't know if I made the right choice, but I do know that I can't continue to live a lie. I looked out the window at the sight of the city speeding by and suddenly realized that this was the beginning of a new life for me. It's full of unknowns and challenges, but at least, for once, my life will be built on truth. 5 years have passed since the day the truth was revealed. Like a slow-moving river, time washes away the pain of the past and brings new hope. The divorce proceedings went much smoother than I expected. With ironclad evidence, Ellen didn't put up much resistance. We quickly came to an agreement that I would leave her the house as compensation for the children. Although Sarah and Kevin are not legally my children, I set up a trust for them, using the alimony payments from George and Chuck as initial funding. "Jack, you don't have to do this," Dave said as I signed the papers. "You're not legally obligated to do it for them." I shook my head. "I know, but in my heart, they will always be my children." The first few months after a divorce are the hardest. I moved into a hotel and started looking for a new place to live. Every night, I stare out the window at the city lights and think about where I've gone wrong in my life. Sarah and Kevin were angry with me at first. They couldn't understand why I would expose the truth in that way. But over time, they began to understand my situation. I'll never forget the day Kevin first offered to call me. "Dad," his voice trembled a little on the phone. I think we should talk. We met at a cafe. Kevin looked much more mature than before, and there was a depth in his eyes that I had never seen before. I understand why you did what you did, he said, and while I still think your ways are a bit extreme, I know you were pushed to do what you did. I felt my eyes water. Kevin, no matter what happens, you and Sarah will always be my children. I love you all, and that will never change. Kevin nodded, and after a moment of silence said, I love you too, Dad. Sarah, on the other hand, took a little longer to come to terms with reality. Her relationship with Ellen becomes strained, often arguing over trivial matters. In the end, I was the one who reached out to her. Sarah, I said over the phone, I know this is hard for you to accept, but remember, your mom is a victim too. She made mistakes, but she still loves you. Sarah was silent for a long time, then said softly, I know, Dad. I just need some time. Slowly, our relationship began to mend. We started seeing each other regularly, eating together, talking. While we both know that things will never go back to the way they were, at least we're still in each other's lives. As for Ellen and her coworkers, their lives have been turned upside down. They both lost their jobs and went through painful divorces. I've heard that they've been trying to rebuild their careers, but every time they just get on a roll, past scandals resurface. Sometimes I feel a twinge of guilt. My behavior not only affected Ellen and her coworkers, but their families as well. But whenever that feeling comes up, I remind myself that it was their own behavior that led to this. My life is slowly being rebuilt as well. I moved into a new apartment and got back into making music. Work has become my healing medicine, and I find myself more focused and creative than ever. 3 years later, I met Amanda. She is a single mother and has experienced a failed marriage. We found empathy in each other and slowly built trust and affection. Are you sure you're ready to start a new relationship? Amanda asked me one day. I looked into her eyes and felt a warmth inside. I guess so. The past has taught me a lot, but it shouldn't stop me from continuing to find happiness. Now, both Sarah and Kevin have their own careers and families. We often get together, and sometimes Ellen attends. The atmosphere was still a little awkward, but we were all trying to maintain a peaceful relationship for the sake of the kids. The biggest surprise for me was the connection Sarah and Kevin made with their half-siblings. They are planning a big family reunion in Nashville next month. Are you coming, Dad? Asked Sarah on the phone. I hesitated. I'll go if you guys want me to. Of course, Sarah said. You'll always be our father. Looking back on these 5 years, I realized that life is like a long journey. There was laughter, tears, betrayal, and rebirth. I lost what I thought was an unbreakable marriage, but I gained my true self and a deeper kinship. Now, as I sit on the balcony of my apartment, watching the sunrise over the city, I feel a sense of peace. Life moves on, and I, too, move on. I look forward to the challenges and surprises that the future may bring, and to the day when I can become a grandfather and be able to spoil my grandchildren. Most importantly, I learned a valuable lesson. Honesty is the cornerstone of any relationship. Staying honest, both with others and with yourself, is key to maintaining healthy relationships. Life goes on, and I, Jack Thompson, am welcoming each new dawn with a truer, stronger version of myself. Thank you for taking the time to listen to today's story. If you enjoyed it, please like and subscribe if you haven't already. If you have a story to share about your own or someone else's experience, please feel free to contact me. Take care.